Okay, so we're live. So I haven't edited anything. I just want to see what anyone thinks on it. I keep trying to think of some clever, catchy phrase like real talk, real insight.
Yeah, you
powered by Smart Capital with Britt, or real talk, real insight with Britt.
You put something in the text this morning that was clear, made sense.
Smart Capital, real talk, real insight with Britt on Balboa. Powered by Smart Capital. That sounds like a show.
Yeah.
You know what? By the way, you didn't like media. I realize I freaking actually love it. I really do. I try to say.
What did you say? I said what? I didn't like media.
Yeah, media was like, or not almost liked it, but you're like, that's not really my thing. And I realized, wait a minute, dude, you've been doing this game for 20 plus years, and you're better than the PR people that you hire to help you. So I understand.
You're just trying to flatter me, Tom. I know what you're up to.
You're trying to flatter. No. I'm saying that even I like it. I'm like, wow, you know what? That's my goals. I'd love to set companies up as media companies.
When we met with Rachel on Friday,
correct,
and I had to spin my tale, I mentioned the fact that I'm not a fan of media. I've never, traditional media I'm used to, but I never got into utilizing podcasts and watching things on YouTube, and it was it's a recent development because I'm working with, again, my other partner, Matt
Lopez.
So I'm thinking about this scenario. My all-time best relationship on Wall Street, still one of my closest friends, is a guy named Bob Fahey. And Fahey is a trader at a mutual fund outfit that focuses on small caps, known as Royce and Associates. Chuck Royce, the father of it all, could be considered one of the father of small caps. The guy actually just retired. In any case, Bob and I were still are extremely close, and he knew my then wife really well, the mother of my children, and her name is Chelsea. Chelsea was really good friends with all of the New York wives. She would go to New York with me because they all loved her, and so we had a great camaraderie. And Bob would talk to Chelsea quite often. Technologically, right? With texting or whatever. And Chelsea and I separated in 2009. So I'm going to guess the year was 2007. And we started this thing. It's the weirdest thing. Chelsea's brother is a model, male model, and he would be considered in the industry a supermodel, even though they theoretically don't have male supermodels. His name is Ryan, and he's extremely successful. And really nice guy. Grew up right here, Corona del Mar. Went to CDM High School. We started this technological communication, which unbeknownst to us was social media. We had this thing called "My Brother is a Model" or something stupid like that. And so next thing you know, we're writing tales back and forth. Bob, myself, Chelsea was involved, but from a distance, writing tales about fictional traders or whatever, or we would talk about our decrepitude, going out for dinner and all that kind of stuff. And it's the weirdest. I can't believe I'm getting a phone call. Hey, I'm walking with Tom. Including the Miami trip when we got back from Miami? I'm going to say 5, 10, 15. I'm going to say it's 22.5, but that's off the top of my head. No, 22,500. Bye. So we started this thing. We would write it and send it back and forth. We'd attach photographs to it and everything. It's like, oh my God, I look back on that now. And then it was maybe a year later where Bob said, hey, you got to check out this thing called Facebook. And so we all got on the Facebook, and that I can tell you, November of 2008. So what happened was, my brother's a model, or some whatever the stupid title was, disappears. Like, oh God, this Facebook thing's great, because we're sitting on trading desks. You have downtime. Shouldn't be doing this, but you are, And because there was another thing. Oh God, there was this other website called Take a Report, TAR. I'll roll back into since we're talking. Can we keep talking about media? So
Go.
Bob says, you got to check this Facebook thing out. And I said, okay. Again, Bob's in New York.
Bob Fahey.
Yeah, and I tell Chelsea about it. And so Chelsea and I signed up, and she's kind of like, I don't know. I'm like, what the hell? Let's just do it. Like, oh my God. It's one of those things. Again, it was November of 2008. All of a sudden, you're finding people that you haven't talked to in forever or whatever. Well, I know it has nothing to do with it. Because I was oblivious to so much what was going on. But in January of 2009, maybe 6 weeks later, my ex-wife said, this isn't working. And time for you to hit the road. Like, wait a minute. This is my house, right. And I didn't want to leave. I didn't want a separation. But, that was all that social media. And I thought, God, did she find somebody on that Facebook? There's no doubt she didn't, because she was never even using it. But, and as time went on, I thought, God damn that social media. But, I found old friends on there and all that kind of stuff. So I get it. I don't like, yeah,
why are you adverse to it in your experience?
There's great utility. Undoubtedly, there's great utility in it, but I just don't like, for the younger folks, I don't like the laziness of it, and the fact that they'll never pick up a book. And it's unfair of me to make that generalization, but I'll say this: my youngest son is now 17. Today's the first day of his senior year at high school. Today.
Excellent.
And we went out to dinner last night with his girlfriend. We were talking about what's called the GATE program, and what in my day was called the MGM program. It's for gifted students, right? And my son's name is Bixby. He got into GATE in 3rd grade. Now, what I remember, he's a smart kid. He's inquisitive, right? Curious. And I remember when he was in kindergarten, going to parent-teacher night in November, which is, just shy of the halfway through the calendar year. Again, this is kindergarten. And the kindergarten teacher walks up to me and said, we don't know what to do with Bixby. I'm thinking, what? He's a great kid. He's a great kid. He's my son. And she said, not only has he read through the kindergarten book rack, he's read it all the way up and halfway through the 3rd grade. And I thought, oh my God. And I told her, I said, well, it doesn't surprise me. We're readers in the family and all that kind of stuff. Because guess what? The kid's now 17 and he's not a reader.
Oh.
And so I know that I don't want to say his life got interrupted, but just like every other kid, the technology, the flashy technology's at the fingertips, and it's a lot easier to take in a 3-minute bite about BS than it is to sit down with a book in a corner and suck it in,
Go back to that curiosity. That curiosity. How is curiosity and intelligence so connected in your experience? Your view.
Well, I guess what I would used to say is it was the seeking of an answer, looking for answers, and I know I've mentioned in our previous discussions that I no longer look for an answer because I have surrendered to freedom. all the paradoxes, right? I don't know. It's because curiosity obviously can be a devilish thing.
In relation to choosing to read a book and find out more and discover versus just doing something that's at your fingertips.
The crazy thing for me in books was one book leading to another, leading to another, leading to another. And I mean, that's been a radical situation in my life in the last 4 years where when I got sober, I started reading some of my old books. And these are books that I'd noted and highlighted and all that kind of stuff. And some are gone. I lost a bunch in a move. I lost 65% of my library in a move many years ago. In any case, so I started reading books I'd read a long time ago, and I had a clearer head, and I'm on the drift, right? So instead of seeking something and going on and picking that off the bookshelf, and I let things be introduced to me, and I think I've talked about this in the past. When the most remarkable thing that I've gone through in the last 12 months, and I hope this relates to your question, but it is about curiosity. About 3 years ago, I picked up a book on quantum computing. You know, again, I'm fresh in my sobriety, and I was led to quantum computing for a reason, because my friends were dealing with the cryptocurrencies. You know, I'd mentioned we were having these discussions here at Succulent on Balboa Island 4 years ago, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, you know, the way that this stuff, you could really increase your hash rate, all the BS and stuff, was, God, if you could use quantum computing. And I'm thinking, well, you know, don't forget the energy component and all that kind of stuff. So I started reading about quantum computing, and I didn't understand anything about the qubits. They talk about the qubits, right, instead of bits. Like, this is just driving me nuts. And I read, I don't know, 4 or 5 paragraphs. I don't even remember the name of the book. It's still sitting somewhere in my office. And thought, screw this. I need to read about quantum mechanics. Because, you know, I was familiar with Einstein's theory of general relativity. I'd never paid much attention to quantum mechanics, quantum physics. So I pull out, I've got the Feynman Collection lecture series, who is, you know, probably one of the greatest physicists of our lifetimes. And he's got stuff in there about quantum mechanics, but it's you know, that was a lecture series, right? Read that. I understood it far better than I understood that computing book. But that makes sense, because we're talking about the basis of quantum mechanics. And then I read Dirac, who was considered one of the founders. I ended up reading, I think, 3 or 4 texts on quantum physics. And I understood it, but it didn't light a fire. And then a year ago, a research outfit that I've followed for years called GovCall. I've talked about it. I love these guys. They published a note last summer, and it was the staff's summer reading list. And there were a number of books that caught my attention. See, this is how the drift works for me. I love their research product. It's extremely expensive, so I don't always have access to it. When I do, I feed on it, you know, and so here's one of those examples. Boom. Oh, their reading list. And I ended up buying 3 of the books on the list. The one that rocked my world was called Helgeland by a guy named Carlo Rovelli. And I had never heard of Carlo Rovelli. I've read but I've read physics books, right? I told you I read, I think, 3 texts on quantum physics. And who's this guy? Helgeland, I'll buy that. So I bought this book. And simplest way to put it is the book changed my life and started me on an entirely new path. His description of quantum physics is radical. And as my Uncle Daniel says, and I'll get back to this because it's extremely relatable to what we're talking about, he's a poet. And the way this guy writes about the world, and when I say the world, I mean the universe. You know, sometimes physicists refer to the world as the universe as the world, right? You know, the way this guy writes is incredible. He's Italian. Books are translated into English. Now, he speaks English. I'm quite certain he speaks French because he's currently at a French university. You know, talking about YouTube, I get to listen to him on YouTube and watch him on YouTube. Dying to meet the guy. He's not that much older than me. And so in any case, I read this book, and he references a number of books in there, not necessarily quantum physics related, but he mentions a couple of novels. And so I end up buying those, and I end up reading those. So that's, you know, again, going back to the drift. Because whatever I'm learning from him in his texts, suggestions that he offers in his own writings, you know, to me, they're worth reading because there's going to be a connection. And to me, that's the current, the drift, the frequency, right? See, the drift is being on the current, or of course, the other method is the concept of being in the frequency, no distortion, right? So I know I keep spitting that out all over the place. One of these days I got to organize that thought process. But so Next thing you know, I've here it is a year later, and I've read I think 6 other books by Ravelli, and the 2 books of his that have completely altered how I view everything I do, including walking with you. All right. First one, Helgelin. The second one is called. Maybe I shouldn't have waited. The second one is called The Order of Time, and I have read. I've probably read 6 or 7 books on time, right? And they're horrible. I shouldn't say that. You know, all they talk about is you know how, you know what time meant when the sundial got here, and then the hourglass, and then the town clock, and how the elites could use time to set the work pattern for the day and all that kind of stuff. You know, obvious stuff. Like, okay, yeah, I get it, right? Well, this son of a bitch, Carlo Ravelli, writes a book on time that will...
How so? Go into it a little bit.
Well, it's just, he explains various concepts, and the primary gist of the book is recognize that what we know as time is a human construct, from the way that we spend the hours in the day to our concept of eternity. Because if you think about it, eternity is a man-made construct. We don't know. And I never thought of it that way. So now I'm thinking, okay, yeah, all the religions use that eternity concept for fear. Better live a good life now so you can have that special life in eternity, right? You know, it's all control and all that kind of stuff. He doesn't chastise any of those concepts, but he has an interesting discussion talking about eternity. Who's to say, right? Anyhow. So now here's the crazy thing. I have an uncle named Daniel who just retired. I might have talked about him with you already. Daniel, he lives in town. Daniel just retired from NASA, JPL, Caltech. And he was the real deal. He is a rocket scientist. A playboy and a rocket scientist. I mean, the guy used to race sailboats and did windsurfing all the time. I remember he was all over the place when I was a kid, sailing and all that kind of stuff. He's the guy that I sailed the Ensenada race with last year. Didn't get to go with him this year. Anyhow, he's retired. He suggested a book to me about 2 years ago. It's called Power, Sex, Suicide. That title would infer some kind of racy novel, right?
I think.
And the book is about the mitochondria. Oh. And the reason why he wanted me to read it was not about mitochondria, but the relationship of hydrogen. Because he and I are, like the fact that hydrogen is an energy source. It's extremely expensive right now, but we talked about it. And so he had me read that book, and it was my his mother's 102nd birthday last April. And we went and celebrated, and then he, his son, my cousin, and I went out to lunch. And I said, look, I'm reading Nick Lane's book. As you know, Daniel, I read about 10 books at once, so I'm slowly going through it. It's relating to this, and it's relating to that, and it's relating.
So again, you read 10 books at once. You can read 10 books at once, obviously. Is that what you said? Okay.
It's kind of a problem because it means it takes me a long time to read a book, but it means I double read a lot of things, and so I soak them in. Before our podcast interview, I sent you some of my research notes, and if you were bored enough to look at them, you'd see that I've transposed a lot of the information from some of the books. I might have had some of the stuff in there that we're talking about. In any case, so I sit down with Daniel. we talk about this.
Balboa graffiti on the
chalk. You should have seen it on the 4th of July. I forget how many years ago. It was during COVID, so it was 2020. They came down here and wrote Black Lives Matter all over everything. I thought, okay. Kind of with chalk, with the rainbow, pastel-looking chalk. Lovely message. They did it on the little island and the big island, right here where we're walking.
Original thought, I'm sure.
It's just an interesting place to put it, you know.
This
So be it.
bucolic land.
So I say, look, Dan, have you ever heard of Carlo Rovelli? He said, no. So well, I read this book, Helgelin, by a minute. Blah, 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 blah. And he's going, oh, well, I'm going to recommend a book to you, Hidden whatever, I forget the title, but by Sean Carroll, another theoretical physicist. All right, I said, okay, I'll grab that book, but I want you to read Helgelin, please. So it's like 140 pages. We go our separate ways. We literally didn't talk for 3 months, even though he lives right there, right? It's that we were miscommunicating, emails, whatever, because there's some business stuff to talk about. And I'm trying to get him to do a Substack, right? That's the business stuff. And because we got him involved with Wolfcat Media, the entity with Matt Lopez. So we talked last week, and he said, oh my God, Brittonius, he calls me. Brittonius, I read Rovelli. I said, okay, so did you like the book? And he said, oh my God, I've learned so much from him. Now we're talking about a guy that just retired from the space race, right? I mean,
And he's learned from someone.
he said, I said, I picked up the Sean Carroll book. I think I read the first 70 pages and I put it down for a while. And he goes, well, like I said, Britt, Rovelli altered my perception. You see, Sean Carroll, the guy that he had me read, is what's called a many worlds quantum physicist. Many worlds, many universes, right? Rovelli talks about that concept and a couple of others in Helgelin, but then also talks about the relational theory, which is the one that Rovelli expresses. And so my uncle said, oh my God, I've given up on the, I no longer follow Carroll's, I no longer believe in the many worlds concept. I realize now it's just mathematical equations. I realize that what Rovelli is saying is more legitimate. Oh my God. I almost, I choked up like, God, that's got to mean something. That's got to mean the drift is going the right way, right? Talk about a form of confirmation. See, the crazy thing is, the reason why Rovelli was so attractive to me was because of his concept of the relational. I've lived my whole life, as I've mentioned to you, as an individualist, an objectivist. We've talked about it on every walk. And it was when I got sober and went through a program where I realized that the community is far more important than the individual. I don't mean on a government basis, I mean on a caring for each other basis, where I replaced my objectivism with subjectivism. We've talked about this, all right? Well, that's everything that Rovelli writes about in the relational. Of course, he's talking about infinite particles and all that kind of stuff and the observer, but in reading this stuff, I realize how important it is that you and I have a relationship. Not only is it important for you and I to have a relationship, but it's important to have Richard, or from a business standpoint, but then we can take our other relations that we have, that we're going to find dispersed throughout the island on our walks, like that girl that you're friends with, I didn't realize how we were, all connected in that node aspect, and for lack of a better term that they use in narrative analysis and media and all that kind of stuff.
How does that work for you emotionally? Like, how do you feel about it?
The simplest way to put it is, to me, it's a form of sedation, but not in a negative way. It's a form of acceptance. It's a form of realization. It's a form of realizing that I have to let everything be what it is, especially my three sons, right? And as an observer, I can recognize what's transpiring.
Hey, good morning. Good morning, sir. Very well, thank you.
I don't need to be a judge. I don't need to have an opinion. And I don't mean that to sound nihilistic, like I don't care what direction my children take. I certainly care. But I need to be an observer first before I manipulate them any further, because my observation if you take quantum physics into consideration, my very act of observing what my children are doing has an influence on them. And if you think about it, it definitely does in a physical sense. If you're in front of them and they're thinking about doing something bad, they're not going to do it, right? So as an observer in that sense, I'm altering their performance without even having to say anything.
So that bring me a question. What's your idea, your take on just presence?
I don't know how to answer that.
I know it's a big general question. But I segued it from your own kid.
I don't know how to answer that because I'm probably not understanding you properly. What I recognize now is that whatever is present is there, and I know this isn't the proper answer to your question, but that's in relation to my concept of acceptance. So I know I'm not giving you a fair answer. I don't think of the word that strongly, I guess, or I would have to sit and ponder it for a little bit.
I thought it was just
well,
a good segue from what you're talking about.
That's a tricky thing because I think about people, and we'll say that guy's wrecked. He's not present right now, right? He's hungover, or he's on some form of medication that's prescribed or unprescribed. What kind of presence is that? It's a physical one, but not mental. That's what I'm saying. It's such a tough one for me to answer, Tom, or to think about.
Even a level of completeness, and I'm going to go back to something that's total right turn, but there's a tune by Peter Gabriel called In Your Eyes. Have you heard of it?
I know that song.
Well, if you listen to the lyrics, I don't remember all of them,
yeah.
I do recall a part of them where he says, I want to be that complete.
Yeah.
Even just your take on that, because I know you've heard that tune many times.
When I think of that song, because interestingly enough, I was losing my first love of my life when that movie came out, which had that song in it, right? Interesting. My first love, and so that song was relevant. And that song, to me, the concept of complete was the joining of the two individuals, the love and the sharing, right? That was a quick one, Tom.
Yeah. Again, it wasn't.
It wasn't
planned. It was part of the drift.
that song still moves me. There's a lot of songs from that era that I didn't care for the music in that time frame, but that song got me then, and it still does. He's an interesting dude. Some of his music, he has a song called Salisbury Hill that I love, and that's from the 70s.
Can you imagine that? Our talks drift into that. Couldn't have planned it. Could not.
Anyhow, and to walk back to that thing with my Uncle Daniel, I was so blown away when he said, Britt told me this. Not only have I read that book, I read 4 more. Like, yes, Uncle.
Yeah. And what's that like when you're suggesting some serious insight and experience to someone who you really revere, and then they come back to you as if they've learned?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That was a radical moment because
like a very full circle of reverence.
The one thing that it meant to me was, and I kind of highlighted it back there, these 2 particular books, as I mentioned, I think I've read 6 of his books in the last 12 months. These 2 that I mentioned, they were life altering. They were perception altering, let's call it that, right? They altered my perception on the way I'll view life for the rest of my life, provided I don't go demental, right? So it doesn't have to be right and it doesn't have to be wrong. That's something that I've recognized in my sobriety, ever since my head clicked into gear 4.5 years ago. There doesn't have to be a right and a wrong. So believing this stuff or theorizing, utilizing it to theorize for your own life, I don't feel bad about it at all. It doesn't have to be the right answer. But it was really, really cool for my uncle to say what he did, because he knows the subject matter, and I've been trying to get people to read this book subtly. Not I don't push it on people, but there's a couple people I care about. I said, you got to read this thing. Interestingly enough, my son that I talked about that used to read, he just started reading it.
Excellent. Share the book again.
That book is called Helgoland,
And
which
the
is
author?
Carlo Rovelli. And Helgoland was an island. And I don't even know what's left. You know, it seems more like a rock. If I remember right, it's in the North Sea. And I'm going to leave it at that. If anybody has any interest, now they have to pick up the book and see why it's called Helgoland.
Britt.
It's an unusual title for quantum physics books.
Another great real talk, real insight with Britt Huycke. Season 1, Episode 2. Thanks for listening. You want to sign off with anything, Britt?
Daniel, I hope I didn't get you in trouble.
Thanks. Bye-bye.